The original Smith Wollensky is unquestionably one of the most iconic steakhouses in New York City. In fact, some say it's one of the best steakhouses in Manhattan, and I wanted to see if that was true. Plus, I had to check out the restaurant's weekend wine dinner, which may just be one of the greatest steakhouse deals ever. It's a beautiful day today here in New York City. Right now I'm doing a bit of reading to pass the time before my dinner this evening, and this dinner is one that I'm really looking forward to. Tonight, I'll be going to one of the most iconic steakhouses of New York City, the original Smith Wollensky. Now, I've actually been to Smith Wollensky before, but not the New York location. I've been to the Chicago location a couple of times. These days, Smith Wollensky is somewhat of a small chain with locations throughout the world. I really enjoyed my experience at Smith Wollensky's Chicago restaurant, and that location is great because it's located right along the Chicago River. It has amazing views, and most importantly, I really enjoyed the food. But when it comes to restaurants with multiple outposts, I really enjoy going to the original location. That historical angle is something that I really appreciate. And this is one thing that I wasn't aware of until recently, is that Smith Wollensky's menus do differ a bit depending on the location. For instance, the Chicago outpost has a pretty nice selection of Wagyu steaks, whereas the New York location does not. However, there is one facet with New York Smith Wollensky's menu that sounds just plain awesome, and it is the entire reason why I am dining there today. On Thursday, Friday, and Saturday after 8 p.m., the restaurant hosts what they call a weekend wine dinner. For $98, one gets to choose an appetizer, entree, and dessert, along with having the ability to drink copious amounts of wine. The word copious is a little vague, but it sounds promising to me. Plus, the appetizer and entree selections they have listed online for the event look pretty good. They're not the bottom of the barrel cheap offerings. In addition, you could even pay a little more to get some of the premium steaks, which might be what I'll do. No matter how one chooses their menu for weekend wine night, it sounds like a pretty good deal, and I am very excited for it. In fact, I really prepared for this. Normally, I would be running tomorrow, but I switched those days around, so tomorrow is a rest day just in case that copious amounts of wine equates to a headache. Plus, I am absolutely starving. So with that being said, let's head to Smith Wollensky and have some steak and wine. Smith Wollensky is located within a distinctive white and green building on a bustling corner in Midtown Manhattan. The restaurant was established in 1977 by Alan Stillman, who also founded TGI Fridays. The story of how the steakhouse got its name is quite amusing. According to Stillman, he opened the Manhattan phone book a couple of times and randomly pulled out the names Smith and Wollensky. The restaurant was born. These days, there are a total of 12 Smith Wollensky restaurants operating within the US and world, with more opening in the future, including one in Tokyo. However, the New York location is unique since when Stillman sold the Smith Wollensky Group, he kept ownership of the New York restaurant, but all the locations do share similar marketing and promotional efforts. These days, the New York Smith Wollensky is a part of the Quality Branded Group, whose other restaurants include spots like the popular Don Angie and Bad Roman. That night, I was incredibly excited for my dinner. I was counting down the seconds until my 8 o'clock reservation, and finally, it was time. Although it actually wasn't, because my table wasn't ready yet, and thus I waited in the bar area for around 15 minutes until I was finally seated. Yeah, things didn't start off on the right foot, but thankfully it got much better from there. In terms of the atmosphere, it was loud, energetic, and chaotic, but that was partly due to the time of my reservation. I'm sure that if I went earlier in the day, it would be a bit more subdued. While the restaurant may not be the best spot for a quiet and intimate meal, it's a good spot for a fun night out, and I had fun. In fact, I had too much fun. Once I was settled, I began to look through the menu, which was actually housed within a picture frame. The New York City Smith Wollensky features most of the typical steakhouse classics. There's a nice selection of shellfish, some solid appetizers, and a variety of salads. In terms of steak, the restaurant dry ages their meat for up to 28 days, and the selection was good, but like I said earlier, the other locations at the restaurant have menus with more modern offerings. I was also given a list of the restaurant's specials, which included an intriguing sounding 16-ounce filet mignon. In terms of beverages, Smith Wollensky has a wide variety of wine, but that list meant little to me that evening since I was there for the weekend wine dinner. The deal features a 3-course prix-fixe menu for $98, accompanied by copious amounts of wine. Although the deal is only available on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays after 8 p.m., the selection of food was great. Most of the restaurant's main dishes were there. Plus, one can pay a bit extra for the premium steaks, which was what I did. I also ordered a side a la carte. In terms of the wine that's offered, it's obviously not DRC by the glass, but it was a fair selection with a sparkling wine, a white, and 2 reds. Now, I was curious what the word copious actually meant in Smith & Wollensky speak. According to my server, it meant unlimited. Yeah, things were about to get interesting. I decided to start off with a glass of the Montalvini Tulia Prosecco. It was a nice wine. In fact, it tasted even better to me since I was incredibly thirsty and it was very hot out that day. I downed that wine pretty quickly, which in hindsight was too quickly as my server rapidly replenished my glass as I turned my attention to the bread. Smith & Wollensky provides a pretty decent bread selection. There were in fact 4 different types of bread within the basket. All of them were pretty good, and the butter was solid too. However, I wish I was able to exercise a bit of self-control when it came to eating the bread. That's just a basic rookie steakhouse foul. Evidently, my stomach took precedence over my brain that night. Filling up on bread was not what I came to Smith & Wollensky for, but thankfully I was soon presented with my appetizer. I went with the Maryland crab cake, and it looked pretty solid. I hardly ate anything that day, and to finally have some warm food in front of me, I was as happy as could be. That crab cake really hit the mark. The crab meat was thick, tender, and flavorful. I also liked the nice crispy top on the cake, which proved to be a textural delight. The tartar sauce below the crab was pleasant as well, as it provided a bit of richness and sweetness, all the while being nicely balanced. I quickly realized that in my haste to finally eat some warm food, I completely forgot about the lemon on the plate. I gave it a good squeeze over the crab cake and then dove back in. One of the most unique things about that dish was a sort of avocado mixture that went perfectly with the crab. Overall, that was a good dish. Not only did I finish that appetizer, I also finished my second glass of Prosecco, which required a third. I also unfortunately turned my attention back to the bread. Now, I didn't have a very long wait in between when I finished my appetizer and when I was presented my steak. It was probably only a period of around 10 to 12 minutes or so, but a good amount of damage can be done in that time frame.
I've really got to behave myself. I'm on my 3rd glass of Prosecco. There's a lot of delicious bread here, and I haven't even gotten to the main event, so I got to slow down.
Thankfully, my steak and side dish finally arrived and they looked great. As I mentioned earlier, I paid a bit extra to get one of the premium steaks. I went with the bone-in rib steak and it was humongous. Now, I wasn't sure how many ounces it was. It didn't list the weight on the menu, but I knew that leaving the restaurant hungry wouldn't be a problem for me. On the side, I got the whipped potatoes, which also came with an extra charge, but personally, having a side dish with a big piece of meat is essential to combat palate fatigue. Now that I had my steak, a change of wine was in order. I finished my Prosecco and switched to a red. I got a glass of the Mazze Poggio Badiola Sangiovese blend from Tuscany. It was a nice wine and it went down easy. In fact, it went down too easy that night. Next, I turned my attention to the steak, and after waiting all day for it, it didn't disappoint. That was a fine cut of beef. First off, I requested it cooked to a medium rare, and that's exactly what I got. The meat was pretty tender and juicy. In terms of its taste, it was on point. The dry aging contributed some nice flavor, but they certainly weren't the strongest flavor notes. Still, it was just weeks earlier that I had the 45-day dry-aged burger from La Bee, and that was a dry-aged flavor explosion in comparison to the steak I had at Smith & Wollensky. Still, that steak tasted great, and it was well seasoned, which really enhanced the beef. Plus, it had such a pleasant sear. Overall, that was one hell of a fine steak. On the side, I thoroughly enjoyed the whipped potatoes. They were so rich and creamy, and the texture was ideal. Those potatoes certainly went down easy, which was good because I was really starting to struggle with the amount of food before me. At the same time, my glass of wine was constantly being filled up. It didn't seem like there was a moment when my glass teetered on empty. In fact, my wine glass was probably filled up more than my water glass. Regarding the service, it was great. My server was a true professional and he did an excellent job despite how chaotic the restaurant was. Plus, I also got to interact with a couple of others who worked at Smith Wollensky, including another server who brought me a special glass of wine that wasn't part of the weekend wine dinner. It's not like I needed more wine, but that was certainly a fine beverage and it was much appreciated.
I have definitely drank too much, but I'm having a hell of a fun time.
Somehow I managed to finish it all and I was pretty full, but I still had to have a dessert. The dessert menu featured most of the typical steakhouse offerings, but I had to go with the coconut layer cake with mango ice cream. In fact, it's sort of a signature dessert of Smith & Wollensky, and my server mentioned how he would often serve it to Martha Stewart when she would come in. The dish looked great, and I felt like I got a second wind just seeing how good it looked. After one bite, I knew right away why that dish remains a signature of the restaurant. It was outstanding. The cake was nice and moist. It had the right amount of rich frosting and a spot-on coconut flavor. Regarding the ice cream, it was bright and vibrant and cut right through the richness of the cake. To put it simply, that was a great dish. Overall, I felt that the weekend wine dinner was a fantastic deal, especially when you consider how expensive alcohol is at restaurants in the US. To my knowledge, there's no other steakhouse deal in New York City quite like it. If you come with a group and do the weekend wine dinner, you're pretty much ensured a great time. But my time at the restaurant was coming to an end, and I had to throw in the towel.
I have reached my limit. I'm literally at the point of exploding. That was a hell of a lot of food.
I didn't finish. I couldn't have had a single bite more. Then it was on to the bill, which totaled to $151.34, but with my tip, I spent about $180. In hindsight, I regret getting the more expensive rib steak. It was excellent, but that was too much food even for me, and my bill would have been much less had I not gotten it. Still, I had one hell of a fine steakhouse experience.
So that was a very fun and tasty meal. Now, a bit of time has passed since then because I wasn't feeling the best the next day. To put it simply, I ate and drank way too much that night. I am just glad that I had the foresight to switch my runaround so I wouldn't have to run the next day because it would have been messy. I'll start off by talking about the weekend wine dinner. That was a phenomenal deal. That is one of the best deals in New York City. That was fantastic. Now, I don't think that I should have ordered that supplemental ribeye. I think I would have been happier with having one of the smaller fillets because that was just too much food. At the same time, what the hell was I thinking having all that bread? I mean, that is such a rookie steakhouse mistake. Regarding the wine, I drank too much. Just because you can have an unlimited amount of wine doesn't mean you should. Frankly, I wasn't expecting to have my wine glass being filled up as constantly like it's a water glass in a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. Smith & Wollensky definitely has good service. Overall, I think the weekend wine dinner at Smith & Wollensky is just awesome, but don't make the same mistakes that I did. In regards to Smith & Wollensky as a steakhouse in general, I think it's a great place. It's truly a classic New York City establishment. If you're looking for the classic steakhouse experience, Smith & Wollensky delivers. Although if you're looking for a more modern steakhouse menu with a wider variety of steak options, including Wagyu, then there are better options out there than the New York Smith & Wollensky. In fact, I think a lot of the other Smith & Wollensky locations out there actually have better menus than the New York location. However, I don't believe any of the other Smith & Wollenskys have weekend wine dinner, and that is a fun option. To sum it up, I think Smith & Wollensky is a great steakhouse. It's a classic New York City establishment, and I had a ton of fun there. In fact, I had too much fun there. Regardless, I will definitely be going back to Smith & Wollensky, but hopefully next time I'll try to exercise a little more self-control.